Welcome to the journey through the world of legendary cars, where today we will reveal the history of the icon of the American oil car Chevrolet Corvette. This symbol of speed and style is not just a car, but a real living legend that has won the hearts of millions. Sports car sales got off to a shaky start in the U.S. after World War II. Understandably, many had postponed family plans, and so the resultant baby boom made the family car a top seller, and the sports car remained a mere whimsy for the wealthy. This is particularly evident when you take a look at the new car registrations for 1952, and of over 4 million vehicles being registered, only 11,199 were sports cars. Responsible for the design of the first Corvette was Harley Earl, then GM's vice president of styling. Each year, and under Earl's watchful eye, the styling department would develop prototypes to display at the major European car shows. It is reported that Earl took great interest in the European sports cars of the time, including the Jaguar XK120, MGTC, Austin Healey 3000 and the like. While all great cars, Earl felt they would not have the market appeal to make them a mainstream success in the U.S. Harley Earl also took an interest in motorsport, and was well acquainted with international sportsman Briggs Cunningham, who had competed in the America's Cup in 1950 Le Mans. The aptly named Le Monstre was Cunningham's first ever prototype sports car, although it shared much in common with his other entry. Cunningham and his team had simply removed the Cadillac body shell and draped it in their own peculiar and rather ungainly version. Dubbed the C1, it would remind you of the saying, "a face that only a mother could love." Later the same year, Cunningham competed in an endurance race at Watkins Glen, New York, where he met up with Earl. It wasn't difficult for Cunningham to convince Earl that there was a need for America to produce a real sports car. The timing was right, with GM's Chevrolet division's sales on the slide. Chevrolet needed a car that would draw customers back to the showrooms, a car that would appeal to the youth market. Earl's proposal was to develop a car that would cost the same as equivalent Triumphs and MGs and be about half the price of the mighty Jaguar XK. He gave this brief to young California designer Bob McLean, who was made responsible for creating the car, while Dwayne Bonstead was to style the body. The main constraint came with the engine. An American sports car deserved, if not needed, a V8. But the only GM divisions developing one at the time were Cadillac, Buick, and Oldsmobile. The team had to settle for the Chevy Blue Flame 6, which was slightly modified to develop 150 bhp instead of the standard 115, further softening the hard core. Virtues found with British sports cars, the designers had to use the Powerglide 2-speed automatic. No manual 3-speed was available, nor could one be modified quickly enough for production. The design was brilliant, capturing modern flowing lines but keeping the design characteristics of traditional sports cars dating back decades before, which called for a small boot trunk and long, slender bonnet hood. The original prototype was an instant success with GM heads, who immediately set about putting the new all-American sports car into production. The body assembly took place in a converted customer delivery garage near Flint. The first car rolled off the production line on June 30th, 1953, although at 16 hours from start to finish the pressure was on to bring time down. By July the factory was producing a car a day, and soon after 3 per day. In December 1953, GM switched production from Flint to an old millwork building that had been used to manufacture buggies and early automobiles in St. Louis, Missouri. Just as things started to come together on the production line, something would go wrong to slow things down, and in November, division general manager Tom Keating set the target for the year at just 300. All were to be allocated to high-profile customers on the waiting list, which included various sports stars and Hollywood actors. 300 had been manufactured, and the waiting list was growing rapidly. Most will remember the 1955 Corvette as being the first of the mark to be fitted with a V8 engine, the 265 Ci joining the original Blue Flame special inline 6-cylinder engine. By 1956, there were no less than 3 different V8s on offer. the base having 210 horsepower. The regular production option RPO 469 came with two 4-barrel Carter carburetors and offered 225 horsepower. There was also a limited-issue RPO 449, the Duntov cam, which developed 240 horses and was designated by Chevrolet as for racing purposes only. It was inevitable that an American sports car would quickly have a V8 sitting under the hood, but the new shape actually had more to do with the then-new Mercedes-Benz 300 SL. The first racing iterations of the 300 SL had appeared in 1952 and featured modestly raked headlights like the first Corvettes. However, when the road-going SLs appeared in 1954, the headlights were moved out and set vertically in the front guards. Even though the Mercedes inline 6-cylinder engine was tilted slightly, the designers led by Paul Breik still needed to include two gentle power bulges in the bonnet for clearance. This theme seemed a perfect fit for the new V8 Corvettes, and under the guidance of Bob Carteret, the front of the new 1956 Corvette resembled the 300 SL. In this era of automobile design, it was not uncommon for car manufacturers to adapt designs from others. The scallop in the front guard can be attributed to the 1955 Motorama Cadillac Dream Car, where the LaSalle I introduced a long horizontal scallop cut into the body side, which created a classic elegance to the side profile of the Corvette. The rear of the car also came in for some rework, the projecting tail lights being integrated into the rear guards. The new model was also a little less utilitarian, with roll-up windows now incorporated, and power versions were available as an option. There were external door handles, and an optional power system was available for the convertible top. The styling changes may have been on the drawing board since 1953, however, it would take until February 1955 for them to get the green light. There were considerable costs involved with the new design. Even the new windows required forming curved glass and fabricating lift mechanisms with support rails, all this in a sports car where the contemporaries made do with side curtains, as fitted to the popular MGTCs and Jaguar XK120. The need for speed. One need for speed. It was back in December 1953 that Zora Duntov wrote to his boss alerting him to the fact that Ford held the high ground with hot rodders, and that if Chevrolet wanted a piece of the action, the RPO items should not be restricted to being parts for the engine, but also the chassis as well. The inclusion of a V8 and new transmission was enough to have the new model feature in Road and Track magazine, but there was still a need to raise the performance profile of the Corvette. In September 1955, Duntov drove a pre-production, full-sized passenger car camouflaged prototype and set a new class record on the 12.5-mile climb to the top of Pikes Peak. Unfortunately, this did little to raise the Corvette's profile, as most punters would instead want to compare the Corvette's speed with the competition. The Jaguar XK120 was capable of 130 miles per hour, and the Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing could do somewhere between 136 and 146 in standard trim. Duntov was given the task of taking the Corvette to a new performance high, and the Daytona Beach project moved to GM's Phoenix test track to see what could be done. Duntov soon determined that he needed another 30 horses to pull it off, and several engines capable of pulling to 6,300 RPM were shipped to Phoenix. On paper, these engines would make the Corvette capable of a whopping 163 miles per hour. However, this would require near-perfect conditions. It would take several months before Duntov could obtain a certified run averaging 150.58 miles per hour. The crew went back to the official Daytona Speed Weeks in February with 3 cars, their engines having modified heads allowing a 10.3:1 compression ratio and developing 255 horsepower. Duntov obtained the services of experienced race drivers Betty Skelton and John Fitch to pilot the other 2 cars. The competition with Ford and their Thunderbirds was fierce, and the Corvettes experienced traction problems on the sand, and John Fitch finished 3rd behind 2 Thunderbirds at the completion of the standing start mile runs. Duntov averaged 147.3 miles per hour for the flying mile, beating not only the Thunderbirds but also Fitch and Skelton. Next came the need to prove the Corvette on the track. Engineers set about preparing 4 cars for the 12-hour Sebring race. During this development, it was decided that parts developed for racing be listed as regular production options, which meant the Corvettes could run in regular production categories against the Mercedes-Benz 300 SL and Jag XK 120s and 140s, rather than in prototype classes against pure racing machines. Thus, the team began the process of inventing and testing parts so that they could catalog each one for eventual over-the-counter sales. They fitted engines with dual carburetors and modified camshafts. They enlarged the intake and exhaust ports to allow better engine breathing, and the bored and stroked one engine out to 307 cubic inches, which was then mated to an imported 4-speed ZF transmission. The Corvettes did not fare well at the race. 2 retired early. One Corvette finished 15th overall, with only top gear remaining usable, while the larger-engined Corvette managed 9th place with a slipping clutch. But what they did do was garner a reputation as being serious contenders, and the profile of the marque was raised considerably. Still, there was a long road ahead, and by the end of 1956, only 3,467 Corvettes had been manufactured, in comparison with over 15,000 Ford Thunderbirds.